Hi there, and welcome to the Skylight Books Author Reading Series. You can find out about this and all of our author events at www.skylightbooks.com. At our website, you can also browse our inventory as well as order books online. And don't be afraid to follow us on Twitter or even be our friend at facebook.com. If you'd like to talk to a real person, we can be reached at 323-660-1175. Thanks for listening and enjoy.
We finally meet Geoff Johns.
Again.
For the first time.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody.
Thanks for coming out
Yeah.
on a Saturday night
Yeah.
or evening.
Evening or whatever. Who here's like a hardcore Green Lantern fan? Yeah. Who's kind of just getting into it? Cool. All right. Well, I'm gonna try to not get too crazy. You know, we'll see what happens. Let me just give a little introduction to Geoff. Geoff Johns, the writer, the man, the producer, all those things. His impact on modern American superhero comics is probably incalculable at this point. I would say so. He's written so many books, but probably best known for his run on The Flash, and of course Green Lantern, which he's still doing now. He's taken these characters that I think for a long time were not selling anything or doing much of anything, and he kind of brought them into the present day, but somehow tied them back to what made them good in the first place. You recently got appointed the Chief Creative Officer. Is that the position?
Yep.
Okay.
I don't know what it means.
It's nice. It's a
a
long
good
name.
title.
For DC Comics and Entertainment. And so that means he's not just writing anymore. He's talking about the movies, the cartoons, you name it. So the Chief Creative Officer, was that originally just publisher? Did it split? Like a series of jobs?
The goal for DCE is to be more integrated with Warner Brothers and get the features out, get the more animated series out, more live action series. I overlook toys, which is awesome. And then I work with the publishers, but I guess it's kind of a new title because Warner Brothers is getting so aggressive with exploring the DC library, which is awesome. So I've been consulting with them on Flash and Green Lantern for the last year, and now I'm just going to be working on all the DC movies. And I'm co-producing Green Lantern. I was on the phone with Mark Strong today, talking about Sinestro. Tell him to read Sinestro Corps; he'll be fine. So it's been really fun.
That's awesome. I just plowed through all that stuff. It is like an amazing mythology. What first got you into comics?
Probably like anybody, I found an old box of them that belonged to my uncle, I think, and I just read some. But I think I remember Super Friends.
You liked Super
Yeah, I like
Friends?
Super Friends.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Who's the Chief guy?
Apache Chief.
Yeah, sorry. He just says it like he's got it right there.
No, I like him.
So as far as like Green Lantern, which I don't know, at least kind of in my viewpoint, that seems to be the thing that really, of all the things you've done, it really hammered home with people, really connected with people. What do you like about the Green Lantern? Like, when did you first, I guess, encounter that character?
I first saw him on Super Friends, probably. He was this like guy with a he had a real big tan or something weird, because he was from Coast City, I guess. So that was supposed to be California. But I mean, that was just, that was kind of just a colorful version of a character that could fly around. But I really got into it when Steve Englehart wrote it in the 80s with John Stewart and Hal Jordan were both Green Lantern, and Guy Gardner was introduced. But the thing that I love about Green Lantern is it was always about overcoming fear, and I really think fear is a force in society that's so strong, and so it's not tangible. Like, we can't put it in a cup, you can't measure it, but it controls our lives. Like, we overcome fear every time we get in a car, walk out a door. For me, planes, I always I hate the news whenever they're like they tell you something has E. coli or there's a breakout, and then they don't tell you what it is. They say you have to watch at 11, so they kind of scare you into watching the news. It's just annoying. And the way that we're hammered with fear over and over again every day, especially I think in American society, that's why I like Green Lantern. It's all about overcoming fear. It's relatable. Like I find Marvel heroes very interesting and cool, and kind of aspirational. Like you want to be Iron Man, you want to put on that suit, but Green Lantern, he's aspirational. You want that ring, but it's also inspiration. There's something about what we do every day. It's, we don't deal with technology every day that we can wear and fly around with, but in order to power that ring, you have to overcome fear. And so that's what appealed to me, is that the superhero myth works the best when it relates to something like Superman is all about trying to fit in when he never will. Batman is dealing with loss. We all have loss, and he's dealing with it in his own way. And so I think the biggest heroes to me, and the best heroes, are the ones that really resonate personally. I think that's why opening up the door with Green Lantern and making it all about emotions and making emotions tangible and real, and that's what superheroes are. They're metaphors for life. If you have this power, this green energy that you can wield, if you overcome fear, it's just symbolic, and it's, I think, the best kind of superhero symbolism.
I basically been reading everything you wrote.
Okay.
And I was struck by something you wrote in Green Lantern issue 3, this current run. And this is at the time that Hal Jordan's flying around. He's having this internal monologue with himself. He's saying, I look around today at the way we live. We're arming security systems, putting metal detectors in schools, and looking over our shoulders at airplanes. The news shouts, tonight at 11, find out which major drug company can make you sick. Is this the life I'm coming back to? Is this the strongest emotion in the universe? Is fear what controls everyone and everything? And he says, of course, in a Hal Jordan way, yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I liked your characterization of, I have to be honest, man, like every time I ever saw Hal, I first got into Hal Jordan during the Green Lantern run, that Neil Adams did. And, during that, like, Green Lantern was just portrayed as like a square, like establishment guy.
It's funny because Green Lantern actually he's so anti-establishment.
Yeah, exactly.
He's the exact opposite. I think in the 70s they did this great run. Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams did this Green Lantern, Green Arrow book where they teamed up two superheroes, and this is when they were really getting about, they were starting to become about more than just fighting bad guys. They're dealing with social issues like racism and everything else. And drug use for the very first time in comics. They had, like Green Arrow's sidekick, Speedy, was hooked on heroin. Unfortunate name.
Should have been.
Yeah.
Should have been Speed.
Yeah. But it was right on the cover, and if that happened today, I think people would freak out on the internet, and they'd say we're destroying society and all this stuff. But they really tackled the hard issues, and the unfortunate thing is that they did it in they used Green Lantern, who'd always been the Green Lantern. For people who don't know, let me explain the Green Lantern Corps very simply. Is that it's an intergalactic police force run by these little blue guys that look like really old Smurfs, and they're the guardians of the universe, and they've created this police corps to patrol and protect the universe, and they basically, their technology is to harness willpower. So for me, and I actually believe this, we all give off emotions, and you can walk in a room and kind of tell when somebody's upset. Some of it's body language, but it is kind of like we give off an emotion. So the Guardians have been able to develop this technology that harnesses willpower. So when we overcome fear, when we do something that requires any kind of willpower, we give off this invisible aura, this green energy that they can coalesce into a power battery in a ring, and therefore their policemen are all chosen because they can overcome fear and access this power and create anything they desire in a construct, a shape with the power ring. But Hal Jordan the Guardians are very removed from humanity. They're devoid of emotion completely. I think, in my opinion, because they fear it. They're actually afraid of emotion because how volatile emotion can be. From love to rage, it's hard to control our emotions. And Hal was always anti-establishment because he would always talk back to the Guardians. And in the 1960s, it was very cartoony and very base, but it was there. And then in the 70s, they did this run where they teamed him up with Green Arrow, who's a very liberal character, and they pushed Hal Jordan to a conservative, and they made him the straw man for all these arguments. So he had to learn oh, racism exists, that's weird. Like,
Yeah.
they made him really, they dumbed him down in order to prove a point, which at the time was fine. But the character, because the run was so popular, the character did get painted with a brush that I don't think was intended for at its inception, and he became kind of known as a real kind of square-jawed, boring superhero. And so my hope was to bring him back to the anti-establishment, always questioning the rules, a daredevil, not quite understanding still what it means to be overcoming fear. He watched his father die in a plane crash when he was a little kid, and he became a pilot anyway, and he kind of did it to prove, I'm not afraid. I want to be just like my dad, but I'm not afraid.
So is he afraid of anything?
Well, he is afraid. He overcompensates sometimes. He leaps into things. He thinks he'll figure it out on the way down. There was one of my favorite scenes I wrote was in a crossover. The world's about to end and everyone's freaking out, and he looks at Green Arrow and goes, "Hey, I got tickets to the ball game Wednesday. You want to go?" It's like, "Are you?" And this character, Blue Beetle's like, "Are you crazy? He's crazy, isn't he?" He's like, "Yeah." Green Arrow's like, "Yeah, he's crazy. He just doesn't, he just doesn't worry about destruction and death, and he always knows they'll figure a way out." But it's tricky that the characters, all these characters from Flash to Iron Man. Even Iron Man was very kind of straight-laced until they did the whole Demon in the Bottle storyline and Armor Wars and all that, and they broke him down.
Didn't they have Hal drinking for a while?
Yeah, they had.
Didn't he have a drinking problem for a little bit?
They had him. Yeah, they had him drinking, which in an origin story they did in the '80s when they were trying to really ground him. And I believe characters should be flawed. We're all flawed, but it felt very unrelated to what his whole being was about, what the metaphor for the book was about. Green Lantern should be about overcoming fear, just an inception from base level, and in my opinion. And so they tacked on, well, he got drunk and he got in like an accident, and he was kind of repenting for that, and it didn't feel like it really meant. It really challenged him to overcome fear, so I wanted to get back to that.
Well, it didn't seem like it was like this. In the 80s, I remember it seemed like you could phone in and kill off Robin,
Yeah.
And then they killed Superman, and then they wiped out Hal Jordan's home city, and it just seemed like, I don't know, it's like, that was really what, going into the Green Lantern Rebirth, you literally, in your proposal for it at the back of the Absolute, you're literally, my proposal, and your proposal is how I'm going to explain or take us away from that. Because basically, Hal Jordan went kind of genocidal and killed a bunch of
or
it wasn't him.
And it's not like, DC Comics publishes comics, and in the 90s they got hit hard by Image Comics, and they made a lot of moves to try and get attention and shake up the characters. So they went as extreme after Superman died. They're like, wow, we can, and these characters can take anything. Like, we could probably screw Superman up really, really bad, and I'm sure we have in stories, but he bounces back because he's so resilient and so many people know who he is. The other characters aren't as resilient because they're not in the zeitgeist as well, like Green Lantern. But
yeah.
But in the 90s, comic books were very flashy and very much about the shock value, and I think a little bit of desperation too, to not feel old. And so that's
But it seemed to me like, I had this problem going back, like Marvel Comics, the X-Men comics had the Phoenix saga. At one point she swallows an entire planet of 8 billion people, and anyway, they're all gone, they're all dead. And at the time, Jim Shooter said, "You can't let her live. She has to die." She committed genocide. Yeah. She destroyed an entire planet, and it kind of when they push that character into, I don't know, push him into actions that really don't fit his character. It's how do you come back from that? You know what I mean? That was the challenge you were facing. How do you come back from a character who killed a lot of people?
Yeah, well, and then the other challenge you have in comic books is that everybody kind of grows up with. I grew up in the late 80s and early 90s, so there's a sweet spot. I like Geoforce, who's a terrible character, but I like him because I remember reading about him when I was 10 years old. But so you have people, readers. You have a segment of readers too that grew up with Hal Jordan going crazy, and so that's the first time they ever met him, and so it is tough to recover from that.
Well, just they kept trying to do different things, right?
They
Like, what
kept-
were some of the things they...
Well, they kept trying to redeem him. They basically, Hal Jordan, at one point, the editor, the book was not selling, the editors decided they're going to replace Hal Jordan, and they decided that he's going to go crazy and kill Green Lanterns and then become a villain. And they did it, and quite honestly, if you look at the storyline, and I took it as a piece of his art, of his journey as a character when I did Green Lantern Rebirth, is that he gave in to fear. I was like, well, if he's going to go that dark, something happened where he was afraid that Coast City, his city was destroyed, he was afraid it was going to happen again.
Yeah, that's
and so he
interesting
lost
when
it.
you said that. Like, his fear was that it was going to happen again.
Yeah,
And I thought, that sounds a lot like America.
yeah,
Well, you must have been thinking that,
yeah.
right?
Well, you got to remember, too, this was like 2000, I think 3 or 2, I wrote the proposal, so it was, 9/11 was still really, really fresh in everybody, especially New York and DC Comics, but everybody's still thinking about and talking about 9/11. They always, I think they will for obviously forever. But then it was like a lot of worry on, there was that anthrax scare. There were scares every other day.
Yeah.
And there still are. I haven't been to the airport and seen it below. Even Burbank, they've got like all these grades of terror or fear that we should feel. They have red, which is like
Various colors. Yeah.
get out of here, and then and then they have like orangish yellow, yellow, a different yellow, and then like green, and it's always been orange ever, like since I've seen it. And that's not wrong. It's just that's what everyone thinks, but that's why I thought it was more relevant now. Green Lantern's actually more relevant now than for an American superhero than I think, and probably the world, than I think he ever was.
So you want him to stand in contrast to, I guess it seems to be, the fear thing still seems to predominate.
Yes.
And you want him to be literally a hero who stands in the face of that.
Yeah.
That brings me to a part. I'm a hardcore Batman fan, and in Green Lantern Rebirth, Batman gets his ass kicked by Hal Jordan.
Yeah.
Because Batman's basically like, well, I have to admit, like me or a lot of other people who are like, oh, come on, I don't trust this guy. He just killed millions of people, or, and he just kept going into Green Lantern's face, and he said something like, what was it? He said, I will tell me what you're gonna do, and he's like, well, I don't have time for this right now. I gotta go save the world.
Yeah, well,
no bullshit.
I always imagine if Green Lantern's all about overcoming fear, then if you're at a Justice League meeting, we're hanging out, like Batman comes in, everybody's like, oh, they're kind of freaked out by him, except Hal Jordan's like, hey man, and it bothers Batman that he can't get at Hal Jordan, so those two have this kind of, and he's all about light, and he comes in bright and shining, and he lets the villain see him, and Batman's trying to sneak up behind him, and Hal Jordan's shining his light on Batman, and he's like, get out of my way.
Do you like Batman?
I love Batman. I'm working on a Batman graphic novel right now.
Yeah, but the Earth One.
Yeah, but for me, if I'm going to write a Green Lantern story, it's about Green Lantern, and it's about. Hey, how's it going? You want to sit down? Okay. It's about. It's got to be about.
The contrast was really great.
Yeah, I thought those two characters worked out really well, and in the comics prior, they had. When Hal Jordan, Green Lantern, was a villain, they had Batman really be kind of his main antagonist, in the JLA, whenever they had him guest star.
So now that so after you brought him back.
Yeah, and there was also a lot of discussion about he had gone kind of crazy and killed all these characters, and I wanted to absolve him of that, at least mostly, and so which is why I created this character Parallax. I took and created into a living embodiment of fear that literally possessed him and took him over in a moment of weakness when he let fear get the best of him. And there was a lot of debate about, do you completely absolve Hal from all this storyline? You're wiping out the story, and I was very adamant, saying I don't want to write a Green Lantern book about him every 5 minutes going, I can't believe what I lost it, I can't believe what I did. I wanted to get back to the essence of Green Lantern, which is overcoming fear, which is why I chose that.
But I would still imagine that there would be lots of people in the Corps and in the cosmos around that would say, well, I don't buy it.
Well, we did that for about, I wrote that.
I saw you did that for
for about a year and a half, but once I got to Sinestro Corps, it was like, okay, we've kind of played that beat,
Yeah.
you know, and now they just look at him, and I think they look at him, he's like an Earth man. They're like, oh, Earth, that place sucks, you know, and they're like, they're born on their planet, they die on their planet, like it's backwater, like they think it's like a tiny little town, like outside Bakersfield.
Jeez, I'm starting to feel bad now.
Yeah.
Being an Earthling.
Well, it's tough.
So then, what you established this Parallax character as literally, you guys know that the green, the yellow color was the weakness for the Green Lantern for so many years.
In the '60s, I hope we're not getting too fanboy for the people that don't know.
Are we getting too fanboy? Anyone? Okay.
I'll try and pull it back as much as I can. In the '60s, everybody had a kryptonite. Like Aquaman if Aquaman was out of the water for like an hour, he died or something. And so he never had a watch, but he did anyway. And Green Lantern, his ring wouldn't work on yellow, and they never really said why. It just was yellow. I always assumed it was because yellow is the color of fear. They probably did too, but it was never stated. So when I worked on Green Lantern Rebirth, I really wanted to say, well, why was that yellow thing? Why was that yellow thing there? What would it mean? And so, if green was willpower and harnessed willpower, then if you harness fear, I said, well, it'd be yellow. I thought it'd be yellow, and then when that happened, I just started to say, well, there's probably, we all give off all these emotions. There's probably a whole range of emotions. There's rage, and there's love, and there's hope, and that's kind of how the other corps developed. These other, eventually in the run that I did, I developed these other Lantern Corps, and they're all very different. Like the Red Lanterns are all about rage, and so that's really where Parallax, this yellow entity, came from.
Yeah. So the movie that's going to come out, you can tell us as much as you can, or as little, or whatever. But is the focus going to be on Sinestro?
The movie is. I can't really talk too much about it. But the movie is, we're in week 6, or week 7 now of shooting. Hal's in it, Sinestro's in it, he's a Green Lantern. A villain named Hector Hammond is in it, Carol Ferris, Kilowog, Tomar Ray, a lot of the alien Green Lanterns, a lot of those guys are there. Green Man, I think, is in there too, yeah. So, yeah, so there's a bunch of them, but yeah, I can't really, but it is all about, you know, I got on they brought me on the movie about 8 or 9 months ago now with Michael Goldenberg, who's the screenwriter, and we reworked the story a bit and got to the focus of fear versus willpower, and really pulled that out. So the emotional spectrum and all that is central to the movie.
But I mean, you've really, since you've taken over the character, have really given him a mythology and that I don't think he ever had before. Like as far as with all the different rings.
Well, he had a mythology of all these Green Lanterns, but he didn't have, I think, probably why it resonates, like you see people with Blue Lantern shirts now, or Red Lantern, a lot of Green Lantern shirts, but because it's about emotion now.
Yeah.
So it resonates a little bit more personally with us. The best characters resonate. They survive. This is one thing I tell executives at Warner Brothers and producers that I meet is that, you know, Dr. Fate didn't survive decades because we didn't survive decades just because they published him. He survived because there was inherent elements in there that just appeal to people, whether it be that cool gold helmet with the eyes peering through, which is cool, or you know what or his name or his powers or whatever is at the core appeals to generation after generation, just like Green Lantern or Superman or Batman. And the idea is not to understand what those elements are.
Yeah.
You know, what is appealing universally and personally about these characters, and capture that and keep everything serving that. Like if you know, Green Lantern's about overcoming fear and the difficulty with emotions, and then charging in and trying to do whatever we can to make the world a better place. Everything's got to be revolving around that. Even if we start to bring in crazy stuff like the shark or whatever,
yeah.
You know, it's still got to be about overcoming fear.
So, who would you say is like your biggest influence as a writer?
It's hard to say. I think probably my biggest influences are a cross between comic book writers and then writers I know personally. When I first moved out here, I met Brian Helgeland, who wrote LA Confidential, amazing writer, and he taught me a lot. Richard Donner was my mentor. He directed Superman and Lethal Weapon. He taught me a lot about story and character, and he was always about heart. And he'd say, "Well, what's the scene really about?" And so I look at a scene and say, "It's Green Lantern versus Sinestro," but it's not about that. What's it really about? What's the comic really about? That's a challenge I make to people. Like at DC, we talk about it. You're publishing an Azrael book. Well, what's that book really about, though? Is it just about a guy who has a sword and stops crime? It's got to be about something else, something more potent. But other writers would probably be, Grant Morrison is one of my favorites. Growing up, I read his stuff. Peter Milligan.
I always see a lot of James Robinson.
Yeah, James Robinson.
In your stuff.
Yeah. There's a lot of comic guys. I work with most of them now, which is really cool.
Yeah.
But probably that.
What's it like to sit in a room with like Mark Waid, Grant Morrison?
Oh, it's cool. Yeah, it's fun.
I just imagine that would be awesome.
Yeah. Grant's become a really close friend of mine, and I like his. I tend to like writers like Brian Azzarello and Grant and Peter Milligan, guys that they do something I don't do what they do. So I like Straczynski. I really like because he approaches things so differently than I do. I really respond to that.
That's cool. So, with your job now, have you had to cut back on the writing at all?
Well, I was going to cut back anyway, but I'm doing 3 books a month right now. I'll probably hold at 3.
Yeah, so you're going to be doing The Flash?
Doing The Flash, Green Lantern, and Brightest Day, and then I've got, after Brightest Day, I'll have a new monthly next year.
What was your first comic? Was it Stars and Stripes? Stars and Stripes, yeah. Anyone remember that?
It's a comic book. It's about my sister. It's really for my sister. She died in a plane crash in 1996, and I wanted to create something for her. And so I was working for Richard Donner, and I created this character, Stargirl, and I pitched it. Actually, I met James Robinson, another comic book writer, but I pitched it to DC, who I'd met a bunch of DC people when I was working for Richard Donner and shooting a movie in New York. And I pitched this idea to them, and they bought it, and so that was the first thing I did.
Yeah,
and it kind of snowballed from there.
Yeah, I just remember you co-writing with, was it Robinson or was it
David Goyer?
Goyer,
yeah. I co-wrote David Goyer, who wrote Dark Knight, Batman Begins, and he's working on Superman right now. It's so surreal to work with him and that stuff. But
so how do you deal with the like comic book fans can be very vicious on like for me, I'm not much of a continuity guy. I like the broad strokes, but what was that guy that you were looking at? This is one piece of criticism that for me just stuck out, and it's kind of like, I don't know, I just don't think the internet's been very good for us fans. It seems like we're not really afraid of saying anything.
Well, it's easy to throw, it's we always talk a lot. There's a bunch of different kinds of people. There's people playing baseball, there's people enjoying the game, and then there's people heckling the players. And the hecklers are pretty loud. But, just don't go online. That's the solution. I like to, I look at my own. I was talking to another writer this week, and I asked him, I said, I just was kind of gauging him a little bit. Sometimes I like to talk craft a lot, and I said, "You've written this book for a year. What would you have done differently if you could go back?" And he said, "I would have fought the editors harder against this, and I would have done, I would have pushed back on this and not let them make me do this." And he kept talking about all the mistakes everyone else did, and it said a lot to me. I think as writers, we have to always look back at our own work with the honesty and criticize our own work and listen to criticism constructively, because that's how we get better. It's certainly how I've gotten better. I wrote a book, a crossover called Infinite Crisis, that had some good and some bad.
Yeah.
The ending didn't work out as well as I wanted to, so I looked at it and I said, well, why? People were saying, well, the art's bad or this or that. I said, no, I got to look at what I did, and I have to put all the pressure on me as a writer. And I learned from that, and I did the next crossover I did with Sinestro Corps, and it was much better. the ending was stronger, and then I tried to take what I learned on that, what was good and bad, and apply it to Blackest Night. And even the short stories, like single issues, I always look back. I had dinner with another writer named Zeb Wells, who's a Marvel guy, and we were talking about this, and always going back. You always want to go back and read something you wrote a year ago, and you'll probably find something that that you've gotten better at. There's those rare books that you're really happy with, and as a writer, and that you wouldn't change. A lot of the work I've done with Gary Frank on Superman, I probably wouldn't change much on those. A lot of Green Lantern work, but there is a lot of work too that you look back and say, well, I would approach this differently now. So I think as a writer, criticism is important, but where you get it from is important too, because the internet, you don't know where everyone's coming from. If someone grew up with Kyle Rayner and loves that Green Lantern, they could just not like Green Lantern no matter what, unless Hal Jordan's not there. So it's you got to kind of weigh everything, the good and the bad. People say, "Oh, this is a great issue." You can't really buy into that either. You've got to kind of look outside it.
When I was reading the Green Lantern stuff, I always liked the tales of the Green Lanterns.
Yeah.
Because I liked all the dudes that weren't white guys.
Yeah.
And I think one thing I really like about the Green Lantern Corps now is that there is a Green Lantern Corps book. Yeah. And so it's not in Hal's work. It seems to be working with these other, races and beings, like interacting more than I think he ever did in the past.
Yeah.
Was that something that you made a point of?
Well, they had, Green Lantern was this awesome idea of this Green Lantern Corps, this space cop thing, and when they introduced Kyle Rayner, they destroyed the whole entire Corps, so it was just a guy with a ring, and it changed the entire concept of what the Green Lantern is about. And so, I thought that was such a wealth of stories and characters and wonderful tales of the Corps that I wanted to bring it back as strongly as I could.
Yeah, because then we have a mutual friend who always likes to tell his Green Lantern story.
Who's that?
Judd. Do you ever tell his Green Lantern story about meeting Julius Schwartz? Yeah. We had a friend when he was a kid used to go. He took the bus and went all the way down to DC Comics, went up to Julius Schwartz, and said he had a problem with the current run of the Green Lantern, which was, I think this would have been in the 80s. And Julius Schwartz brought him into the office. Hey kid. And he said, so what's the problem? And he goes, where's Hal Jordan? I want Hal Jordan back. And then I don't know how truthful that story is. I mean, I've talked to him a million times over, but it's a pretty great story, because he was, as a kid, he challenged Julius Schwartz, and Julius Schwartz sent him free comics for years after that. Just because as a kid they brought in Mike Carlin into the room. They brought in all the editors at the time, and Julius said, tell these guys what you told me.
That's cool.
So
it didn't do anything though, did it?
Not for that for that time. But no, I mean it seems like but hey, you got free comics for a while. But so what do you ever see yourself doing any kind of creator-owned stuff or
I've done some creator-owned stuff in the past. I did a graphic novel for Humanoids called Olympus. I did a book for Wildstorm called Possessed. I do have a creator-owned book. It was supposed to come out this year because of the new gig. It's been put on the shelf for just a little longer. But a lot of people ask me, why do you do so much DC Universe stuff? And it's because I like doing it. I really enjoy the DC Universe. I love the superheroes, and I like in comics, that's where superheroes were born. Like, I don't quite understand people who there's people who maybe turn their nose up at superheroes and think it's it's lowbrow, or it's there's a little bit of an elitist part of comic books where superheroes are kind of looked down on, and it's superheroes are comics because that's where they came from. Like detective stories and everything else, great, but superheroes are the only thing that started in comics, and to me that's something magical and interesting, and I think that if you look a little deeper at a lot of superhero stories, you'll see that they've got as much value as a lot of the other books out there.
Well, I agree. I mean, I'm in an area, we're in an area now where hipsters are the ruling class, and there's a lot of that attitude. But I think it's strange having really nicely stocked comic book sections in a bookstore.
Yeah.
It seems like people are really open to it.
Yeah.
And they see the value in superheroes. It's just, there's badly written stuff in any
Any
genre.
form. Yeah, there's badly written. Just because a movie's independent doesn't mean it's great, and vice versa. But but I also think it's great for kids to have superheroes. I think it's fun. My nieces love Green Lantern. They love Kilowog. They watch the Green Lantern thing. All they do is talk about Kilowog.
Why does I was just reading one of the Green Lantern issues, and Kilowog sounds like he's from the Bronx.
Yeah, he does.
And he actually uses like terms.
Yeah, I told, we were going through the script on the movie, and we Bronxed up his dialogue a little bit. So.
That's just one of those fun things you can do.
It's fun.
So thanks for talking. Would you take some questions from the crowd? Anybody have any questions?
Is there a character that you would like to sink your teeth into, either in the DC universe or elsewhere?
Wonder Woman, probably. I've been thinking a lot about Wonder Woman lately. Francis Manipool sent me this cover he did of a Wonder Woman cover, and he said, "When are we going to do Wonder Woman?" And as soon as I saw the art, I started thinking about stories. I'd like to tackle her. I think she could. I think Flash and Green Lantern are well on their way to A-list status. But my hope is that Wonder Woman, JMS is going to do a run right now, which is exciting. But my hope overall with DCE is to get Wonder Woman up to the top of the food chain with everybody else.
So is that a rebirth, reinvent sort of thing, or just take it on and make the character a joke?
We'll see.
Yeah.
What made you interested in comic books?
What made me interested in comic books? Probably, I remember watching Super Friends with my brother, which is a cartoon like Justice League. And then I went to a store and I saw they had books about them. And I thought, oh my God, they have magazines on these guys? This is cool. And so I just started buying them all the time. And that was it. But I like drawing them. I used to draw. I actually wanted to be a comic book artist originally. And before I got into high school, and so I used to just draw them. I think they're fun to draw.
I noticed you did a TV Smallville episode.
Uh-huh.
How was that, and did you like the end result?
Yeah, it was fun. It was different because it was there was a budget, and I wasn't used to that. But I'm used to like writing double-page spreads with like 5,000 Green Lanterns flying through the air and fighting 5,000 Red Lanterns and 5,000 Black Lanterns, and so I had to kind of tailor my script to a budget, and we did have to. I remember a lot of budget meetings where I had to just keep cutting away and cutting away and cutting away. But the greatest part about it is that I love collaboration. I like people. I like writing a lot. It's awesome to do, but I get a little, I just want to hang out with people and talk about stories and ideas, and so that's why I like to collaborate with people. And so with Smallville, it was fun because I went to the set, I worked with the director, Glenn Winter, and the actors, and the producers kept reshaping the script and rewriting the dialogue, and it was great to see them play out a scene, and then I would go back in and rewrite the scene and tweak the dialogue because it just didn't sound right. But it was really a fantastic experience. I got very lucky because the people on it were incredibly nice. You hear horror stories of people who rewrite your scripts, and they just, all they did was give me direction and really help me out, and it was a great experience. It was really lucky.
Anybody else?
Yeah, now that you're co-producing the Flash movie and that's right, and now you're doing DC Online and you're in charge of a lot of stuff, where do you see yourself in about 5 years?
I don't know. Hopefully we're doing Green Lantern 2 and a bunch of other DC movies, and I hope that the DC characters, I hope got characters, and big and small, like Blue Beetle. I love the new Blue Beetle. My hope is to really get that character out there in prominence, and the Teen Titans, Cyborg. Everybody would be. My goal is to just get as much DC. I want kids. I want my nieces to grow up surrounded by DC stuff, not Iron Man and Spider-Man. So that's my ultimate goal, is to have them have green rings on. My niece is actually named Kara after Supergirl, and so she refuses to call herself. She's 3. She says, "No, I'm Superman." She refuses to call herself Supergirl. I think my brother might be a little concerned with that, but it's really cute. But my hope is that I think that superheroes, especially DC, like I talked about, the inspirational element of these guys. Like for me, the Flash is all about the way I've kind of looked at the Flash as emotionally, Barry Allen is at a standstill in his life. He doesn't connect with people until he's hit by a bolt of light and he becomes the Flash, and then he has to interact with people and save people, and he begins to realize, I can move forward in life. He's so anchored down by the past, and so the Flash becomes about something. Becomes about not letting all the regrets and the tragedies in your past stop you from living your life and stop you from moving forward, and that's going to be all buried in guys with ice guns and time travel and all that fun stuff. But I want to bury that in there because I think it's again a good emotional message for people in general. It's something we all have to deal with. We all have things that we wish we could change. We wish we could go back and change, but we got to embrace the now and move forward. And so my goal is to really have the DC heroes out there, because I do think that they're fun and they're entertaining, but I also think that they teach us a lot about ourselves and about life, even if we don't know they're doing it.
Were you sorry,
No, it's okay. I'm good.
were you pleased with the casting that they did? Blake Lively, environmental.
Yeah, it's perfect. Yeah, I talked to Mark Strong this morning.
Well, Mark Strong was actually
Yeah,
really cool.
he's great. He called me up, and we talked about Sinestro for about half an hour, and got into his character, and the casting is just phenomenal. The dailies that I've seen. I'm going back down to New Orleans in a couple weeks, but I have high hopes for this one. Really high hopes. Yeah.
I was always scared the technology of filmmaking would be able to capture Green Lantern.
Yeah.
I was curious, in terms of effects, post-Matrix, Spider-Man. I don't need detail. I just.
Well, the costume's going to be entirely computer generated, and that's because in the comics the Ring generates the suit. So we want to go for authentic looks. The costume is very faithful to the comics. There's a few tweaks, but it's Green Lantern. The construct designs I've seen have looked great. The Green Lantern Corps look great. It's all going to be in post, a lot of this stuff, because no one's going to wear a big Kilowog suit. But it's so far, it's I think that this is the right time to make this movie. Martin Campbell did a great job reinventing James Bond for Casino Royale. So again, I have such high hopes for it, and I'm very particular about this one. So
We're gonna see Cowgirl.
Oh.
Since I haven't seen much of her fucking.
Oh yeah,
Wow.
you'll see her coming up really soon. Cowgirl. Right now, Hal Jordan has always had this on-off relationship with his boss, Carol Ferris, who runs an aircraft company. And in the comics, he's been dating another pilot named Cowgirl, but now he's kind of been flirting with Carol again, and it's going to go a little bit further than that. So, and then Cowgirl will find out. So she won't react well.
Cowgirl showdown.
More of a Cowgirl Hal showdown, I think. Yeah.
See, I can believe that with the test pilot,
Yeah.
that he would be juggling. To Cowgirl? Is that the name?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. But she doesn't look like that. Like, she's good looking, right?
She wears a cowboy hat whenever they're in a bar. And I'll tell you why I called her Cowgirl. It's actually interesting because I want to create a new supporting cast character for Hal Jordan. And supporting cast characters just get lost in comics, and so I wanted her to have a very specific identity and a big introduction and a call sign, because I'd spent a lot of time with, I went to Edwards Air Force Base and spent a lot of time with test pilots up there, and they all had call signs. And so Hal Jordan, in the first issue I wrote, saves this plane, and the pilot comes out and she takes off her helmet and her blonde hair falls down, and Hal smiles and says, "Yellow, my one weakness." And then they start a relationship, but she's called Cowgirl, and because I thought people would remember that name, rather than Jillian, whatever, Perlman. Yeah, even I forget it.
Any other questions? You and then you, and I think that'll.
I just have a question about, you talked about collaboration, and I'm curious about your collaboration with your artists, and how much of that works in the story, and is there anybody that when you get the art, you're like, oh, they kind of made this better?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny is that Jeff Loeb actually taught me how important it was to make sure you know who you're working with artistically, because everybody's strengths are different. including our own. Everyone's weaknesses are different. And so like when I started working with Gary Frank, who's a phenomenal artist, he does a lot of Superman stuff I've done with him, I would start cutting out dialogue because his expressions were so good, I could just save, like, I don't want to cover that up, and I'd cut dialogue, and I'd cut dialogue, and finally I evolved my scripts to a place where I had the silent panels built into my scripts. So it takes you a while to kind of figure out your artist, but when you trust your artist, and your artist, you know your artist is going to make the story better, it's, you know, there's nothing more fantastic in the world. Gary lives in Italy, and I've never met him. I'm going over there actually this fall, so we can work on the Batman stuff, but he's a fantastic collaborator, and I like to talk a lot, so we'll talk on the phone. He wakes up around 11 o'clock here, so we'll talk at night sometimes, and they'll keep me up late, but we'll talk about the stories and takes on little scenes, and that's collaborating is the best part of comic books because it's so pure. You've got your writer and your artist and your editor. You have an inker and you have a colorist and everything else, but really it's only a couple people working on a project, whereas with like Smallville, there's a million people. The features, there's a lot of people, so you really have a pure representation of what you want to get across. But you know, I've been very fortunate, especially right now. I work with, I think, the best artists in the business by far, and it helps change my writing because I can let them tell the story or show the story, so I don't have to tell the story. I can let the panels just be there, and I can let the images be there, and yeah, collaborating's great.
What style do you write in? Is it more like the Marvel style?
No, I don't do plot style. There's two types of writing comics. There's a thing called plot style, which a lot of Marvel people used to do. They don't do it so much anymore, where you'd write page 1 and here's what happens on the page. Page 2 and here's what happens on the page. And I never liked that. Then there's full script where you actually break down panel 1, dialogue, panel 2, dialogue, panel 3, silent, panel 4, dialogue. And I always prefer that because the lines that you're writing, sometimes someone says a line that's really emotional, important, and you want to get in there and see their reaction. And when you write plot style, you're kind of at the whim of, you know, even the artist is like, I don't really know the emotional content of it. So I find it not as a little bit of a plot style is a little bit of like a factory, you know, where you got to write an issue and you're like page 2 through. I've seen plot scripts where like they're pages 4 through 7. Captain America fights the Red Skull. Go crazy. And it's just, to me, that's a little insulting. It's putting all the work on the artist.
I'm sure Jack Kirby liked it.
Yeah, well, but it's unfortunately though, a fight isn't just, hey, they fight through a bookstore and they blow through a wall. You know, if you have a fight, you want that fight to actually mean something and resonate, and even from the props that you pick up, you know, the little books in the background, you want every detail you can possibly get.
You had one more question over there?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you about how you kind of approach as a writer, writing like big event comics almost, as opposed to anthology, single issue, slower things, whenever Green Lantern does slow down, you know?
Yeah, well, Green Lantern's slowing down a little bit right now, but not too much. I like to keep that energy up for that book. I feel like right now it's, you know, we'll have a lot more character, I think quieter scenes, but the big scenes will be big still. I've done a lot of event books. I've probably done more event books than most writers, and I love event books because I love a lot of characters, and I love the high stakes of the you know, the stuff going on. I love all the interactions, and I like working with characters like Mara, like obscure characters who I'm like, wow, that character has so much potential. And I knew I was going to bring Aquaman back. And I said, if I can build up Mara through Blackest Night and make people actually like Mara, then when Aquaman comes back, half the job's done because he's with the coolest superheroine in the world. She's a badass. And so when Aquaman came, so my mission in that was to figure out a core group in Blackest Night, figure out a core group of characters. It was going to be Hal Jordan and Barry Allen as kind of the cornerstones, and I wanted them at the front and center because DC always has Batman and Superman and Wonder Woman at the front and center, and Green Lantern and Flash should be there. So the way I approached it was, well, we're going to do this, and I want to bring in a couple other characters that didn't necessarily have a lot of spotlight, and would serve the ending well, and that's so it's a mix of both. Is you can kind of trick people to read Mara in Blackest Night, but if I did a Mara one shot, I couldn't really do that. Like, they'd kind of blow it off. Maybe now they would check it out, especially if she had a red ring on. But, you know, the greatest thing about events for me is that you're exposing new characters to an audience that normally would not go look at them. Like with Brightest Day, we've got a book about Aquaman, Firestorm, Hawkman, Hawkgirl, Martian Manhunter, and Deadman, who I think is kind of a breakout character right now. And, you know, Deadman is this character who's a spirit who's come back to life, and he's not very happy about it, which is bizarre. But we've got Brightest Day now, which is reaching a really wide audience with characters that normally, you know, their books are canceled in a year or two. So the hope is to use these events for good. It's not about, you know, obviously DC loves the sales when the events work, and they like the crossovers and they like all this stuff. But for me, it's got to be more about character and building things so that when the event's over, we have a better DC universe, or we have characters that are a little more polished or are a little bit more important to the mythos. But also events, the reason I like events is, again, collaboration. I like sitting in a room with Peter Tomasi and JT Krull and everybody, all my friends and my fellow writers. Pete sends me a script. We do this to each other all the time, and I read it and I mail him it back. I'm like, damn it, you know, I got to try and beat you because it's so good. And then I'll send him mine, and he'll do the same thing. And so, working with other writers, if you can have enough self-awareness, like as a writer, I'm sure a lot of you guys probably want to be writers or are writers. I think as a writer, you need a lot of self-awareness and a lot of honesty with yourself about what you're good at and what you're not good at, and what your accomplishments or your ultimate goals are. And if you have people that are like that you're working with, it's even better.
Well, one thing, guys, we're an independent bookstore, and Geoff is here to sign pretty much anything you guys bring. Absolute, Green Lantern, Rebirth, though, is the main book we're focusing on. But if you brought something from home to sign, we please ask you to purchase a book here. Because, like I said, we're an independent bookstore, and we want to have more events like this for you guys. You guys purchasing a book here will really help us. And I really want to thank Geoff Johns for being here. Okay, and we're going to set up the line to...
You've been listening to the Skylight Books author reading series. Don't forget that you can check out this and all of our other great podcasts at www.skylightbooks.com. Today's music was provided by Ashling and Arlo. Oh my. You can check them out at MySpace, Facebook, or at the iTunes Music Store. Thanks for stopping by, and we hope to see you soon.